The morning began like any other morning in the tall office building in the center of the city. People rushed in and out with coffee cups and phones pressed to their ears. The sound of shoes on the floor mixed with quiet voices and elevator bells. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked important. Near the entrance, an old janitor moved slowly across the floor. He pushed a worn cleaning cart with careful hands. His back was slightly bent, and his hair was thin and gray. His clothes were clean, but old. He had been working there for many years longer than most people noticed. He arrived before sunrise and left long after sunset. He knew every corner of the building, yet almost no one knew his story. He worked in silence, wiping the floor near the main hall. His movements were steady and patient. He took pride in keeping the place clean, even though no one thanked him. Most people walked past him as if he were invisible. Some looked through him. Some stepped around him without a word. He was used to it. He had learned long ago that silence made life easier. At that moment, a woman entered the building. She walked fast with confidence. Her clothes were expensive and her posture was sharp. People moved out of her way without thinking. She spoke loudly into her phone, giving orders and correcting others. Her voice carried power and impatience. She believed the building belonged to people like her. She did not look at the floor as she walked. She did not look at the people around. Her eyes stayed forward, fixed on her busy world. The janitor had just finished mopping the area and placed a small bucket beside the cart. He stood nearby, waiting for the floor to dry. The woman took one more step, and suddenly her foot slipped. Slightly, she stumbled and grabbed the air to balance herself. She did not fall, but the moment shook her pride. Her phone stopped, her face turned red with anger. She looked down and saw the bucket. Her eyes moved from the bucket to the old janitor. Her anger exploded. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. She accused him of being careless. She said he was stupid and slow. She said people like him should not be allowed near important places. Her words were sharp and heavy. They filled the open hall. People stopped walking. Conversations ended. Heads turned toward the scene. The building felt silent except for her voice. Some workers felt uncomfortable. Others pretended not to watch. No one spoke. No one stepped in. The old janitor stood still. He looked at the floor for a moment. Then he lifted his head slowly. His face was calm. His eyes were tired but gentle. He said he was sorry. His voice was soft and respectful. He moved the bucket away and lowered his head again. This response only made the woman angrier. She expected fear or excuses. Instead, she saw calm. She mocked his apology. She said he should learn his place. She laughed and shook her head. She reminded everyone that she was late because of him. The janitor did not answer. He kept his eyes down. His hands held the mop tightly, but he did not speak. Years of life had taught him when words were useless. He waited quietly until she finished. Around them, people felt uneasy. Some remembered their own parents or grandparents. In the janitor's face, some felt shame, but fear kept them silent. The woman ended her speech with a final insult. Then she turned and walked away, her heels hitting the floor with force as she disappeared into the elevator. The noise returned slowly. People went back to their work pretending nothing had happened. The janitor remained standing for a few seconds longer. He took a deep breath, then continued cleaning the floor as if nothing had happened. Inside his mind, memories stirred. He had been disrespected before many times in many places. He had learned that dignity did not come from how others treated him, but from how he treated himself. He wiped the floor carefully, making sure it was dry and safe for others. He remembered a time when life was very different, a time when people listened, when he spoke, a time when his decisions mattered. He pushed those thoughts away. This job was his present, and he accepted it with humility. A young worker passed by and looked at him with kind eyes, but said nothing. The janitor offered a small smile. The worker hesitated, then walked on. Silence once again filled the space between people. The janitor finished his task and pushed the cart toward the service hallway. The sound of wheels echoed softly. Behind the walls, the building continued its busy life: meetings, calls, plans, deals. None of them noticed the quiet man who kept everything running. What no one knew was that this small moment would soon shake the lives of many. The words spoken in anger would return with weight. The woman who believed she stood above others had no idea that her world was about to change for. Now the old janitor continued his work, quietly carrying dignity in his heart, while the building stood tall, unaware. That a storm was beginning to form, the old janitor walked slowly down the quiet hallway. He pushed his cart with care and looked at the walls where shadows moved with the morning light. He had been in this building for decades, and he knew every corner, every hidden path where no one looked. He moved like a ghost yet. He was very much alive with memories and thoughts that no one could. Seeing his mind, he went back to the past, to a time when he had a family. He remembered mornings filled with laughter and evenings full of stories told around a small wooden table. He remembered the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of gentle hands holding his own. Life had been different then, full of hope and dreams. He had wanted to become someone important, someone respected, but life had taken him down a road he had not chosen. He had studied hard in his youth. He had been intelligent and determined. His teachers had believed in him. His friends had admired him. Yet the world had a way of testing him. He had lost some opportunities. He had seen the people he trusted betray him. He had faced harsh winters and empty homes. He had learned early that strength was not in power, but in patience and dignity. The janitor had worked in many places. He had cleaned floors in schools, offices, hospitals, and factories. He had learned to see people without needing them to see him. He had learned that kindness often went unnoticed, but it was worth giving. He had learned that respect had to be earned. But humility was priceless. He carried these lessons quietly inside him. He remembered the first time he entered this building. Many of the employees had looked at him with curiosity, some with pity, some with annoyance. He had not cared. He knew his job was simple, but his heart was proud. He wanted to do his work well, even if the world did not care. He wanted to leave a small mark of goodness wherever he went. The arrogant woman from earlier had seemed larger than life. She walked as if the building belonged to her. She spoke as if no one else mattered. She moved as if the world had to follow her rules. Yet the janitor had seen many people like her. He had seen pride and anger take control of others. Their words had hurt him, but they had never broken him. He thought about her mistakes, her anger at a bucket, her harsh words toward someone she believed was beneath her. She had no idea who she had spoken to. She had no idea about patience and history. She had no idea about the quiet strength that walked past her unnoticed. She had believed that power was everything, but the janitor knew better. He remembered other people in the building. Some were kind, some were indifferent, some were cautious. The young worker who had smiled at him earlier reminded him that not everyone ignored the world around them. There were still people who could feel empathy, who could see the value in quiet hard work. He hoped that someday the woman would see. Tooth, the janitor, moved to a window and looked outside. The city was alive with noise and motion, cars, buses, bicycles, and people, all moving in rhythm. He remembered being young and running along streets with excitement. He remembered chasing dreams and learning lessons. He remembered falling and standing. Again, he had grown old, but he had not lost the lessons life had taught him. Inside the building, he continued his work. The smell of cleaning supplies mixed with the faint scent of coffee and polished wood. He mopped floors, dusted shelves, and straightened chairs. He moved with care, knowing that small actions mattered even if no one noticed. His hands were steady. His heart was patient. He worked as if the world depended on it, even if it never would. Memories returned to the janitor of moments when he had been underestimated. People had laughed at him. People had ignored him. People had treated him as invisible. He had faced cruelty with silence. He had met arrogance with calm. He had faced injustice with patience. He had learned that every insult, every slight was temporary, and that dignity was permanent. He thought about the woman again, the way she had raised her voice, the way she had expected everyone to bow to her anger. He felt no hate toward her, only sadness. He knew that life would teach her lessons in ways she could not imagine. She would face moments when her confidence would not protect her, when arrogance would not help her. She would learn humility eventually, as everyone does. The janitor took a moment to rest, leaning on his mop. He closed his eyes and remembered small joys in life: a smile from a stranger, a kind word, a moment of quiet in the chaos of the world. A feeling of purpose and work done well. He carried these small joys with him like treasures that no one could take away. He remembered his friends from long ago, people who had walked with him through difficult times, people who had laughed with him and cried with him. Their voices echoed in his memory, reminding him that life was not only about power or wealth, but About connection and kindness. He carried those memories like a lantern in darkness. He thought about the future the building would continue. Its people would continue. Their worries, ambitions, and pride would continue. He would continue to quietly. Cleaning and caring, he would continue teaching without speaking. He would continue living with dignity, even if the world did not. Notice time passed slowly, and the janitor moved through the building. He pushed his cart and cleaned quietly. The sounds of people working surrounded him, but he did not need their recognition. His mind was full of reflection and understanding. He was not bitter, he was not angry, he was simply aware of life and its lessons. He knew that moments of injustice were temporary, that pride would not last, and that calm patience held its own power. He had seen enough of the world to know that strength was quiet, strength was steady, and strength was in the ability to carry oneself with dignity even when treated unfairly. Though janitor finished one floor and moved to another, he looked around and observed the people working. They were busy with their own lives, their own ambitions, their own concerns. Some would rise, some would fall, some would learn, some would ignore lessons. He observed all without judgment. He had learned that observation was a teacher and silence was a shield. He thought about the arrogant woman again. Her life was moving fast. Her power seemed untouchable. She had no idea that moments of arrogance could meet moments of truth. He knew that her lessons would come soon enough, and that the world had ways of correcting and balance without cruelty from him. The janitor continued moving carefully. He cleaned corners that others did not notice. He straightened items that seemed small. He did his work not for recognition, but for the quiet satisfaction of a job done well. He understood that every task, even small ones, had meaning and value. As he worked, he remembered the patience required in life, the patience required to endure hardship, the patience required to forgive, the patience required to remain calm in the face of arrogance, the patience that had kept him going through years of struggle, the patience that was now his strength. He paused and looked at a photograph taped to the wall near the elevator, a picture of children playing in the park long ago, but clear in memory. He smiled softly and continued. His life was full of simple moments that carried deep meaning. He carried these moments with him like a secret treasure. The janitor worked through the morning and into the early afternoon. He moved slowly, yet efficiently. He maintained a rhythm that was almost unnoticed, yet steady. His presence was felt only when someone paused and saw the care in his work. He moved like a quiet river flowing beneath the chaos of the building. At that moment, he did not think of recognition or fame. He did not think of revenge or pride. He thought of dignity and patience. He thought of quiet strength and life lessons. He thought of the small joys that made life meaningful. He knew that the woman and others would face their own lessons in time, and that he only needed to continue his work. The old janitor continued through the halls, moving his cart and cleaning with care. He remembered the past and thought about the future. He observed the people around him and carried wisdom quietly inside him. He knew that life was full of surprises, that arrogance could be humbled, and that patience always held power. As the sun moved higher, he looked outside the window again. The city moved in rhythm, yet he remained steady. His life was simple but meaningful. His work was small but important. His lessons were invisible, yet powerful. He carried dignity silently and waited for the moments when the world would reveal its own truths. The building hummed with the sound of life. People walked quickly with files and papers pressed to their chests. Phones rang in sharp bursts, and conversations carried down the hallways. Yet through all the noise, the old janitor moved calmly, pushing his cart and cleaning the floors. He had a rhythm that no one noticed, but it kept the building steady. The arrogant woman was now in a meeting room. She entered with confidence. Her steps were fast and precise. She believed she controlled everything around her. The room was full of people with papers and screens. Everyone waited for her to speak. She smiled and spoke loudly, giving instructions and correcting mistakes. She did not notice the tension in the air or the way some eyes watched her with concern. Outside the room, the janitor quietly walked past. He had been summoned to clean the hall near the meeting room. He moved slowly, yet efficiently. His eyes noticed the small details that others ignored. The floor had smudges and footprints. He knew it would take careful attention to make it spotless. The woman continued speaking. She had no idea that the janitor was nearby. He had seen her arrogance and her anger just moments before, but he did not speak. He had learned that some lessons were not taught by words, but by time and circumstance. He moved quietly, cleaning the hall, while the voices inside the room rose in urgency. Suddenly a message came to the woman. She looked at it, and her confident face changed. She furrowed her brow and read again. Her voice faltered for a moment. She was not expecting this information. Her eyes darted around the room. She asked questions and received answers. She realized something important had happened, something she had not anticipated. Janitor paused near the doorway. He had seen many events unfold in the building over the years. He had observed mistakes, successes, and surprises. He had learned too. Read people and situations, even if he was not involved. He watched silently as the woman began to understand that her control was slipping inside the meeting room. The discussion became serious. The woman could no longer dominate the conversation. Her confidence wavered. Her words did not carry the same power. She realized that decisions she believed were hers were in the hands of others. She felt the shift in authority, and it shook her. The janitor moved closer quietly. He pushed his cart and cleaned near the entrance of the room. He did not interfere, but he observed carefully. He knew the people in the room and their roles. He understood the tension and the unfolding situation. His calm presence contrasted sharply with the chaos inside. The woman tried to regain control. She raised her voice and gave orders. She demanded explanations and solutions. She thought she could manipulate the situation. She did not understand the depth of the events that were now moving faster than her ability to respond. The janitor continued his work silently. His mind reflected on the irony of the moment. He had been humiliated by the woman just hours before, yet now he saw a turn in events that she could not control. He felt no joy in her discomfort, only a quiet awareness that life had a way of balancing itself outside the room. Other employees noticed the change in atmosphere. They whispered quietly to each other. They noticed that the woman who usually commanded respect now looked uncertain. They noticed the calm figure of the janitor moving with dignity and care. They wondered if he saw more than they did. The meeting intensified. The woman's mistakes and decisions were being questioned. Her past actions were examined. Her arrogance and disregard for others were highlighted. She tried to explain, but the room had shifted. Her confidence had faded, and she realized that she could no longer control the outcome. The janitor paused near a window and looked outside for a moment. His thoughts drifted. He remembered times when he had seen people rise and fall. He remembered that life often teaches lessons, not through confrontation, but through circumstances. He knew that the woman was about to learn a lesson in a way that would stay with her forever. Back in the room, the tension reached a peak. The woman's colleagues revealed information that connected the janitor to key decisions in the building. She had never known that he had influence beyond what was visible. His experience, knowledge, and insight made him an important figure in unexpected ways. The room grew silent as the realization settled, and everyone saw the irony of the situation. The woman who had publicly humiliated the janitor now faced a reality where her actions had consequences. She understood that her arrogance had blinded her to the power of people. She underestimated the janitor. Continued his calm movements. He cleaned the floor near the meeting room. He adjusted a chair and straightened a small table. He did not speak, but his presence became noticeable to those in the room. His dignity and composure contrasted with the woman's sudden uncertainty. The woman tried to speak, but her voice was weaker. She realized that the decisions she had made were now being influenced by people she had ignored. She understood that she could not simply assert control with her usual arrogance. She had to listen and respond to the truth of the situation. The janitor remembered other moments in his life when he had been underestimated and ignored, yet he had always remained patient and composed. He had always worked with care and dignity. He had learned that influence does not always come from position, but from knowledge, experience, and respect earned. Silently, he thought about the lessons the woman would learn. She would understand that power is temporary and arrogance is visible. She would learn that respect must be given, as well as received. She would learn that small, unnoticed people can hold unexpected influence in the world. The meeting began to settle. The decisions were made. The woman's attitude had changed. She looked at the janitor and realized the depth of his quiet presence. She understood that he had witnessed more than she thought, and that his knowledge and insight were valuable. she felt a mixture of surprise and humility. The janitor moved away from the doorway. He finished cleaning the small area near the meeting room. He looked at the floor and nodded to himself. His work was complete for now. He knew that life would continue to unfold, and that moments of revelation and humility were part of the journey outside. Other employees began to resume their work. They whispered quietly about the events they noticed. The change in the woman. They respected the janitor in a new way. They realized that appearances can be deceiving and that dignity and patience can hold. Unexpected power. The janitor pushed his cart down the hall. His steps were steady, his mind calm, his heart full of quiet understanding. He reflected on the events and remembered that life often teaches lessons in unexpected ways. He had learned patience, humility, and dignity, and he had seen them ripple outward, affecting others even without words. He moved through the building. He noticed small details that others missed. A door slightly ajar, a stack of papers uneven, a window that needed cleaning. He attended to them with care. He understood that attention to detail and consistency in work reflected in her strength and character. The woman left the meeting room slowly. She moved through the hall with a changed demeanor. Her steps were quieter, her confidence tempered by the knowledge she had gained. She looked at the janitor briefly and felt the weight of the lesson that had arrived silently yet with undeniable force. The janitor continued to his next task. His day was far from over. Yet he carried no bitterness, he carried no triumph. He carried only dignity, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of work done well. He knew that the world would continue to test people, and that moments of revelation would continue to arrive for those willing to learn. He paused near a window and looked outside. The city moved on, as it always did. Yet he felt the balance of life in the shift he had witnessed. The arrogant woman had learned a lesson. The building had maintained its rhythm, and he had done his work. Quietly and with respect, the janitor moved forward through the hallways. With steady hands and thoughtful eyes, he cleaned, and he observed he moved like a calm river beneath the noise of the world. He understood that influence and understanding often come quietly, and that moments of truth have a way of finding those who need them most. The arrogant woman walked slowly through the building. She tried to compose herself, but inside she felt a storm. She realized that the events in the meeting had exposed her mistakes and weaknesses. She felt the weight of her arrogance and the decisions she had made in haste. She understood that her reputation was fragile and that the people around her had seen the cracks in her confidence. The janitor moved quietly down the hall. Pushing his cart, he cleaned the floors and adjusted small things along the way. His eyes noticed the woman moving ahead. She seemed troubled. She spoke softly to herself, checking messages and rethinking plans. He did not approach her, yet he observed, silently aware of the shift in the building. And in her demeanor, in the office, people whispered quietly. Some had always respected the woman, yet now they saw her differently. Others had feared her, but now they felt cautious. She had lost the authority that had once made her unstoppable. Her words now carried less power, and she noticed it with growing unease. Janitor thought about patience and timing. He had witnessed many situations where pride had come before a fall. He had seen powerful people lose their footing. He had seen humility bring more respect than arrogance. He continued, cleaning, aware that life had a way of teaching lessons, without violence, without anger, yet with undeniable impact. The woman entered her office and sat at her desk. She tried to plan her next steps. She made phone calls and sent messages. She hoped to regain control, but the answers she received only confirmed the new reality. She understood that some mistakes could not be fixed immediately. She realized that the arrogance she had relied on would not save her now. The janitor paused outside her office. He straightened a chair and adjusted papers that had fallen. He heard snippets of conversations from the phone. She spoke sharply, yet there was doubt in her voice. Her certainty had faded. She felt powerless in ways she had never imagined, yet he did not judge her. He only observed the natural order of events unfolding in the hall. Other employees noticed the change. They exchanged glances and whispered quietly. They respected the janitor for his steady calm and wondered at the irony that the woman who had humiliated him was now facing the weight of consequences he had silently witnessed. She had learned a lesson that no words could have taught. The woman received more information that shook her further. She discovered that decisions she had believed were hers alone were now influenced by others. including people she had ignored. She saw that she had underestimated those around her, including the janitor. Her mind raced as she tried to adjust her strategies, yet the situation moved faster than she could respond. The janitor continued to clean and observe. He moved like a quiet presence through the building. His mind reflected on the lessons of life, on the inevitability of consequences, and the quiet strength that comes from patience and dignity. He understood that power without humility could crumble, and that arrogance often blinds people to reality. The woman tried to regain some control. She met with colleagues and tried to negotiate explanations. She realized quickly that apologies were insufficient. Her actions and attitude had left impressions that could not be erased. She felt a mixture of fear and regret. She understood that the world had shifted and that she was not in command as she once thought. The janitor paused near a window. He looked outside at the city bustling with life. People moved with urgency and purpose. He remembered his own past and the lessons he had learned through hardship. In observation, he felt no satisfaction in the woman's discomfort, only an understanding that life balances itself over time. The woman walked through the hall again. Her steps were slower, her shoulders slumped. She passed by the janitor briefly there. Eyes met for a moment. She felt the silent presence of someone she had once humiliated. She realized that he had always carried dignity and strength, and that her arrogance had blinded her. To the quiet influence of others, employees watched the interaction. Quietly, some felt sympathy for the woman now humbled. Others admired the janitor for his consistent calm and wisdom. They realized that strength often comes in unseen ways, and that humility is more enduring than arrogance. They observed silently. As the natural course of events continued, the woman returned to her office. She tried to regain focus. She reviewed documents and recalculated decisions. She felt the urgency and pressure from all directions. She understood that she could no longer act with carelessness, and that her world had shifted in ways that demanded awareness and humility. The janitor moved to another floor. He cleaned and adjusted small details that others overlooked. He carried with him the lessons of life and the knowledge that patience and dignity are powerful even without recognition. He continued quietly, knowing that the building would function smoothly because of steady hands and careful attention. The woman faced multiple challenges. She had to answer questions from superiors and colleagues. She had to confront errors and omissions. She had to understand that her arrogance had created blind spots. She began to see the importance of listening, observing, and respecting the people around her. She realized that she could not move forward without learning humility. The janitor observed the flow of the building. He saw employees moving with purpose and urgency. He saw the woman adjusting to her new reality. He understood that life often teaches lessons through circumstances, not confrontation. He moved quietly and methodically, attending to small details that maintained order and cleanliness. The woman paused by the window in her office. She looked out at the city with a new awareness. She understood that her world had changed. She felt a mixture of fear, regret, and realization. She began to comprehend that her actions had consequences, and that respect is earned, not demanded. She felt the weight of her arrogance and the importance of humility. The janitor continued his rounds. He cleaned floors, dusted surfaces, and adjusted small things with careful hands. His movements were quiet yet deliberate. His mind reflected on the natural order of life, on the inevitability of consequences, and on the lessons learned through patience and dignity. He understood that the woman would remember this day for a long time. Employees began to notice the calm presence of the janitor and the changed demeanor of the woman. They realized that the events were a turning point. They understood that arrogance could crumble, and that patience and quiet strength often hold power. They whispered quietly, observing the unfolding shift in the dynamics of the building. The woman received messages and calls that confirmed the changes. She realized that her power had diminished, and that she had to respond with caution and respect. She understood that life had taught her a lesson in humility, and that the janitor, who had once been humiliated, was now a silent witness to her changed reality. The janitor paused near a hallway mirror. He straightened his clothes and adjusted his posture. He reflected on the day and the events that had unfolded. He felt no pride in the woman's discomfort, only an understanding that life has its way of balancing arrogance and humility. He continued moving quietly through the building, attending to his work with dignity. Woman slowly returned to her desk. She tried to focus on tasks with a new perspective. She began to understand the importance of listening, observing, and valuing others. She realized that arrogance and haste could lead to collapse, and that the lessons learned today would shape her future actions. Janitor finished cleaning a section of the floor and paused. He looked around at the building functioning smoothly because of small, unnoticed actions. He reflected on the power of patience, humility, and dignity. He understood that his work, though silent, had influence, and that lessons are often taught by circumstance rather than confrontation. The woman glanced at the janitor once more. She felt the weight of realization. She understood that her arrogance had consequences. She understood that power without humility is fragile, and that respect must be given as well as earned. She felt a mixture of fear, regret, and awareness, and she knew that her world had changed forever. The woman sat quietly at her desk. She looked at the papers in front of her, but her mind was elsewhere. She had felt the weight of her arrogance and realized that her world had shifted. She understood that the people she had dismissed were not powerless, and that her actions had consequences. She felt the presence of lessons learned the hard way. The old janitor moved slowly down the hallway. He pushed his cart with steady hands and careful movements. He cleaned floors, dusted surfaces, and adjusted small details that others overlooked. His mind was calm and reflective. He had seen the woman's arrogance, her anger, and now her humility. He felt no joy in her discomfort, only understanding of the lessons. Life delivers quietly inside the office. People whispered softly. They noticed the woman had changed her. Steps were slower, her tone gentler, her words measured. She seemed aware of the effects of her previous actions. They observed the janitor moving with dignity and quiet strength. They realized that true power often comes without announcement, and that patience and humility hold lasting influence. The woman stood and walked to the window. She looked outside at the city bustling with life. Cars, buses, people moving with purpose. She realized that life moved on, regardless of pride and arrogance. She felt a sense of reflection and awareness. She understood that she must rebuild trust and respect, and that she must do so sincerely. The janitor continued cleaning. He paused at a corner to adjust a chair. He noticed small smudges on the floor and wiped them carefully. His movements were deliberate and calm. He understood that the small, unnoticed actions attained balance and harmony in the world. He had lived long enough to know that patience and dignity are forms of quiet power. The woman received a call from a colleague. She listened and responded thoughtfully. Her words were measured and careful. She considered the needs and feelings of others. She realized that leadership is not about dominance, but about understanding and respect. She felt the weight of her mistakes and began to understand that humility was essential to moving forward. Janitor moved to another section of the building. He cleaned quietly and methodically. He observed the interactions around him. He saw people talking, sharing ideas, solving problems. He knew that his work allowed the building to function smoothly, even if unnoticed. He felt satisfaction in the quiet influence of careful work done with dignity. The woman paused to reflect. She remembered the moment she had humiliated the janitor. She felt a mixture of regret and awareness. She realized that appearances can be deceiving, and that quiet strength often holds unexpected power. She began to understand that respect must be given freely and that arrogance blinds the mind. The janitor pushed his cart down the hallway. He noticed a young worker struggling with a heavy stack of papers. He stepped forward quietly and helped without a word. The worker looked up surprised and grateful. The janitor smiled gently and moved on. His actions were simple, yet they carried lessons of kindness, patience, and awareness. Woman watched from her office. She observed the janitor's calm and thoughtful presence. She realized that he had always carried dignity and that her previous actions had been short-sighted. She understood that true respect cannot be demanded but must be earned, and that patience often reveals the truth more effectively than anger. The employees in the building began to notice subtle changes in the atmosphere. The arrogance that had once dominated the hallways was replaced by quiet awareness. The woman who had been humbled now moved with care and attention. Her interactions were measured and respectful. The janitor continued his work as before, steady, calm, and dignified. The woman received messages confirming the changes. She understood that she had to adapt and learn. She realized that humility and patience are more powerful than haste and arrogance. She began to make plans to correct her mistakes, to listen more, and to observe the influence of those she had ignored. The janitor cleaned floors, polished surfaces, and adjusted small items along the hallway. He moved like a quiet river beneath the activity of the STI building. He observed people solving problems and interacting with care. He understood that influence is often silent and that the lessons learned through patience endure longer than the loud declarations of power. The woman reflected on her actions. She remembered how icily she had dismissed the janitor. She felt a deep awareness of the consequences of her arrogance. She began to understand that her life and career depended not only on her own decisions but also on the respect and collaboration of those around her. She felt a sense of humility and readiness to change. The janitor paused near a window. He looked outside at the city filled with movement and purpose. He reflected on the passage of time, the lessons learned through experience, and the quiet satisfaction of work done with care. He understood that life teaches lessons in many ways, and that patience and dignity are enduring powers. The woman returned to her desk. She began to address tasks with renewed awareness. She listened carefully to colleagues and considered the impact of her decisions. She realized that humility and patience are not weaknesses, but sources of strength. She understood that respect and collaboration lead to sustainable influence. The janitor moved to another hallway. He noticed small marks on the floor and cleaned them gently. He adjusted chairs and straightened objects. He observed the people around him interacting with care and purpose. He understood that even the smallest actions contribute to balance and harmony, and that quiet influence can be more powerful than forceful authority. The woman stood and walked slowly through the hall. She greeted colleagues with a new sense of respect. She observed the janitor moving calmly and appreciated his presence. She understood that true leadership requires awareness, humility, and patience, and that arrogance only leads to downfall. Employees observed the interactions, the change in the woman's demeanor, and the quiet dignity of the janitor. Became clear. They realized that respect and humility create harmony, and that small, unnoticed actions often have lasting influence. They whispered quietly, acknowledging the lessons in human behavior unfolding around them. The woman reflected on the past. She remembered the moment of public humiliation and felt a sense of gratitude for the lesson learned. She understood that pride can blind judgment, and that patience and dignity hold more power than anger and arrogance. She felt ready to move forward with care and awareness. The janitor continued his work steadily. He cleaned, dusted, and adjusted items along the hallways. He observed quietly and moved with purpose. He understood that life teaches lessons to everyone, and that influence can be subtle, patient, and enduring. He carried dignity and wisdom silently through every action. The woman returned to her office. She looked out the window and felt a sense of calm awareness. She understood that her mistakes had consequences, and that she had to rebuild trust. She realized that humility, patience, and careful observation are essential for growth, and that life often teaches lessons through experiences rather than words. The janitor paused briefly. He looked around at the building. Functioning smoothly, his work allowed others to focus on their tasks. He felt satisfaction in quiet influence and understood that patience and dignity carry lessons stronger than any words. He moved on, continuing to clean and maintain balance, though. Woman made decisions with thoughtfulness and care. She addressed tasks and interactions with a new awareness. She understood the value of collaboration and the importance of listening. She realized that true strength is found in humility and patience, and that arrogance can collapse even the most powerful positions. The janitor finished his rounds. He reflected on the day and the unfolding events. He understood that life often teaches lessons subtly, and that quiet influence holds enduring power. He continued his work calmly, aware of the lessons given and received, and the balance maintained through patient and dignified actions. 8. Woman looked at the janitor as he moved down the hallway. She felt deep respect and understanding. She realized that humility and patience are more powerful than pride and arrogance. She understood that life teaches lessons in unexpected ways, and that dignity and quiet strength are enduring forms of power. The building continued its rhythm. People worked, moved, and interacted. The lessons of the day lingered in awareness. The woman had learned humility. The janitor continued to carry dignity and patience. The story of the day became part of the quiet flow of life, and the influence of small, unnoticed actions would continue to shape the world around them. The morning in the building was calm yet full of life. People moved with purpose and focus. Phones rang, and footsteps echoed down the hallways. The old janitor pushed his cart steadily along the polished floors. He noticed the small details that others often missed: a chair slightly out of place, a paper on the floor, a window smudged with dust. He attended to them quietly, knowing the importance of small actions. The woman who had learned humility moved through the hall with a changed demeanor. Her steps were measured and careful. She greeted colleagues with respect and listened attentively to their concerns. She observed the janitor as he worked silently and felt a growing sense of appreciation for the patience and dignity he carried. She remembered the lessons of the previous days and understood that life had shifted her perspective. The janitor continued his rounds. He cleaned and dusted and adjusted small items along the hall. He observed the people moving around him. He saw them solving problems, collaborating, and interacting with care. He understood that even the smallest unnoticed actions contribute to the balance and harmony of the workplace and life itself. The woman entered her office. She paused to reflect on the events that had unfolded. She remembered her arrogance, the way she had dismissed the janitor, and how quickly her world had shifted. She realized that her position was not invincible and that respect is earned, not demanded. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to act with thoughtfulness and humility. Outside her office, the janitor continued moving quietly. He noticed a young worker struggling with a heavy stack of folders. He stepped forward without a word and helped adjust the load. The worker looked up, surprised and grateful. Janitor smiled gently and moved on. His actions were simple, yet they carried lessons of kindness, patience, and awareness. Woman observed him for a moment. She realized that his actions were not only practical, but also instructive. He had taught more by moving quietly with dignity than she had learned through loud confrontation. She understood that true influence often comes from patience and steady commitment, rather than position or authority. Employees in the building began to notice the subtle shifts in atmosphere. The arrogance that had once dominated was replaced by quiet awareness and mutual respect. The woman moved with care and consideration. Her interactions were measured. She began to see the value in listening and observing the people around her. She began to understand that leadership is as much about humility as it is about decision-making. The janitor paused near a window and looked outside at the city bustling with life. People moved quickly with purpose, yet his mind was calm. He reflected on the passage of time, the lessons learned through experience, and the quiet satisfaction of work done with care. He understood that patience and dignity carry influence that is often unseen, but deeply felt. The woman returned to her desk. She reviewed messages and responded thoughtfully. She considered the feelings and perspectives of her colleagues. She understood that her previous arrogance had created blind spots, and that humility and attentiveness are essential for effective leadership. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and awareness. The janitor moved through the hallways, cleaning floors, adjusting chairs, and attending to details. He observed people collaborating and solving problems. He understood that even the simplest actions contribute to the larger functioning of the environment. He felt satisfaction in the quiet influence of careful work done with dignity. The woman paused to reflect. She remembered the moment she had publicly humiliated the janitor. She felt a mixture of regret and awareness. She realized that appearances can be deceiving, and that quiet strength often holds unexpected power. She began to understand that respect must be given freely, and that arrogance blinds the mind. The janitor continued his rounds. He cleaned and observed. He noticed a stack of papers that had been misplaced. He carefully arranged them, straightened chairs, and wiped smudges from the floor. His movements were deliberate and calm. He understood that the small, unnoticed actions maintain balance and harmony in the world. The woman walked slowly through the hall. She greeted colleagues with newfound respect. She observed the janitor moving calmly and appreciated his presence. She realized that true Leadership requires awareness, humility, and patience, and that arrogance only leads to downfall. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to act differently going forward. The employees observed the interactions quietly. They noticed the change in the woman and the continued dignity of the janitor. They whispered softly, acknowledging the lessons in human behavior unfolding before them. They understood that patience, humility, and quiet strength often hold more power than loud words or aggressive actions. The woman reflected on her past. She remembered her mistakes and felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons learned. She understood that pride can blind judgment and that patience and dignity hold more power than anger and arrogance. She felt ready to move forward with care and awareness. The janitor moved to another section of the building. He cleaned floors, dusted surfaces, and adjusted small items. He observed the interactions around him, saw people helping each other, sharing ideas. In collaborating with care, he understood that influence is often silent, and that lessons learned through patience endure longer than any words. The woman returned to her office. She looked out the window and felt a sense of calm awareness. She understood that her mistakes had consequences, and that she had to rebuild trust. She realized that humility, patience, and careful observation are essential for growth, and that life often teaches lessons through experiences rather than words. The janitor paused. Briefly, he looked around at the building functioning smoothly. His work allowed others to focus on their tasks. He felt satisfaction in quiet influence and understood that patience and dignity carry lessons stronger than any words. He moved on, continuing to clean and maintain balance. The woman made decisions with thoughtfulness. In care, she addressed tasks and interactions with a new awareness. She understood the value of collaboration and the importance of listening. She realized that true strength is found in humility and patience, and that arrogance can collapse even the most powerful positions. The janitor finished his rounds. He reflected on the day and the unfolding events. He understood that life often teaches lessons subtly, and that quiet influence holds enduring power. He continued his work calmly, aware of the lessons given and received and the balance maintained through patient and dignified actions. The woman looked at the janitor as he moved down the hallway. She felt deep respect and understanding. She realized that humility and patience are more powerful than pride and arrogance. She understood that life teaches lessons in unexpected ways, and that dignity and quiet strength are enduring forms of power. The building continued its rhythm. People worked, moved, and interacted. The lessons of the day lingered in awareness. The woman had embraced humility. The janitor continued to carry dignity and patience. The story of the day became part of the quiet flow of life, and the influence of small, unnoticed actions continued to shape the world around them.